My name is Max Banfield. Welcome to my talk. Today I'll be talking about how I developed the symptoms of severe chronic fatigue, which is now called chronic fatigue syndrome, and how I'll later talk about how I developed a modern method of treating it, which is doing everything at your own pace, staying within your limits and avoiding the severe symptoms. Nowadays they've changed the labels to chronic fatigue syndrome, and they advise patients to use pacing and to stay within their energy envelope to avoid post-exertion malaise. They're just changes in labels. They haven't made any improvements to my method at all, and they don't know most of the details. They just know the basics. But I'll now start by telling you how these symptoms occurred. When I was about 14, I started getting chest pains. So I went to my GP a few months later to discuss it, because they would recur. And he was a nice, friendly GP, family GP, genuinely interested in his patient's health. But when he tried to convince me there was nothing wrong with my heart, he was worried because he tried that with most of his other patients, and I didn't know that. And it never convinced anybody of anything because of the confusion about chest pains and heart disease. And the pains kept recurring, and a few years later he sent me to a heart specialist. And the heart specialist had the same problem with probably a third of his patients. And they had this type of chest pain. And he did a cardiogram and said, there's nothing wrong with my heart. And I said to him, do you think poor posture or leaning forward could have anything to do with it? He said, go over in the corner, bend down and touch your toes. So I did. And he said, did that cause chest pain? I said, no. He said, get out of my clinic. Don't come back. Stop wasting my time. I've got a lot of little old ladies with heart disease who need my help. And you've got nothing wrong with you. It was a very dramatic act he was putting on to convince me there was nothing wrong with my heart. I didn't believe he's doing anything other than acting. He wasn't fooling me. I just knew he didn't know anything about this, which meant nobody in the world knew anything about it because he's a heart specialist and they read research journals. So a few more years went by and those pains stopped. And I was seeing a new doctor by then, and I told him about it. And I said, do you know why they started? He said, no. I said, do you know why they stopped the chest pains? He said, no. He just shrugged his shoulders most of the time I asked him a question about anything. That's the type of guy he was. What's wrong, I'd say to him, and he'd go like this every time I saw him. So a year or so went by and I started getting abdominal pains. And I asked him what the cause was, and he'd shrug his shoulders. And so he'd send me off to, what do I do about it? He'd send me off to have a blood test. And I'd come back and say, what did you find? He said, nothing. And I'd say, what do you think's the cause now? And he'd shrug his shoulders, he didn't know. And I'd say, what do I do next? And he'd prescribe a pill or a potion. Didn't help. So next time I saw him, he said, did the drugs help? I said, no. I said, what do I do now? And then he sent me for an x-ray. And a month later, I go see him again and said, what did the x-ray show? He said, nothing. I said, what do I do now? And he prescribed a pill. And the next time I'll see him, I say, what do I do now? And he said, I'll send you for a CAT scan. And then I go back a month later, I say, what'd you find? And he'd say, nothing. I said, what do I do next? He'd prescribe a pill. So this went on for several years. And all he did was shrug his shoulders, send me for a test. Next appointment, give me a pill, shrug his shoulders, send me for another test. And he never found anything. And it was obvious eventually that he didn't have the foggiest idea what was causing my health problems. Well, about a year after that, I started getting an ache in my left kidney about an hour after I started work. And I asked him what the cause was. He said he didn't know and sent me for various tests and said I don't have kidney stones. One of them was a CAT scan and it showed nothing. So I said I haven't got kidney stones. But eventually he prescribed me a drug, and a few months later I passed a kidney stone and I heard it bouncing off the ceramic wall of the toilet. Well, anyway, a month after I started getting these aches, it was about probably 23, maybe a year or so later, I was in the gym doing gymnastics, doing a round off and back somersault. For the first time in 10 years in gymnastics, I felt dizzy. But gymnasts don't get dizzy. You're supposed to, you can and do many somersaults a night without any forms of dizziness. But this was a problem that eventually meant that I had to leave the gym. And the next problem I had was sitting in a chair at work and feeling faint and dizzy. And this just kept getting worse. And the problem was the same as it had always been. I'd go to the doctor and tell him I was feeling faint. He'd say he didn't know why. He'd send me for various tests, like CAT scans and so forth. And I'd ask him what he found. He'd say nothing. And I'd ask him what I do. And he'd shrug his shoulders and prescribe a pill. And then I'd go back to him. He'd ask me, did the medication work? I'd say, no, what do I do now? And he'd send me for another test. So this just kept going on until that at that stage, for the first time in my life, I had what he called labile blood pressure, which is unstable blood pressure rather than constantly high blood pressure. And I was so ill that I decided I'd have to start doing my own research. So that's what I did. So what was my health like when I started doing research? Well, I was laying on my back on the lounge room carpet most of the day, too exhausted to get up, and I'd read one or two words in a medical dictionary every day and sort of start thinking about how the body works and why these symptoms could come about. And it soon became obvious the world's best researchers didn't know or understand the problems, and it was affecting about 200 million people. People who don't read medical books, so they don't know that the doctors don't know what to do. And I had to figure it all out. And I thought, how can I do that? I'm not a doctor, didn't top my class at school, and it doesn't really matter. I've got the problem, no one else can solve it. So I'm an adult, not a child, I'm going to figure this out myself. And so I kept on doing research and went on to develop the modern methods of treating those things. But in the meantime, when I was laying on my back, I would have to get up. So I would roll over onto all fours. And then I would put my hands on the base of a chair. And then I would stand up slowly. And as I stood up, I'd have to lower my head. And then when I reached the standing position, I'd straighten my back and slowly lift my head up. Because if I went up fast, I'd just faint. I never actually fainted, but if I'd have got up fast, I would have. So that was how bad I was. And then when I was walking about the house, it's generally a slow pace. And once I'd established that I could walk around, be okay. But if I went out into the street, tried to walk along a path at a normal pace, as I lifted my left foot up, my heart would pound violently. And then I'll put it down and lift my right foot up, my heart would pound violently. I'll put it down and my heart would stop pounding. I lift my next foot up, my heart would pound. My heart would pound violently every step I took. So I turned around, went back, and laid on the lounge room carpet, laid on my back again, stared at the ceiling, thought, what am I going to do about this? And I kept reading maybe a paragraph a day of medical research literature, which I managed to get with great difficulty. It started off for maybe the first 6 months just buying a book from the shop on the A to Z of health problems, reading one word a day. And after 6 months, I was able to get on a bus and go to the Adelaide University Library and them the same way. And a year later, I enrolled in a research organisation where they did fitness. And training under medical supervision. And when I went there, I'll briefly describe some of the problems I had. The first problem was they made me get onto an ergometric cycle. It's like a bicycle with one wheel, and pedal, while wires were attached to my chest in a cardiograph machine. And they told me to pedal for several minutes. My heart would pound violently. I'd say, "You sure I'm supposed to be doing this?" They said, "Yeah." There are 2 research cardiologists and 2 lab assistants, probably physiotherapists. And all had this think positive and run fast, telling me, think positive and run fast, or you'll never get fit. And pedal fast. So I did. And then they put the brake pressure on the bike up and tell me to do it again. Then they put the brake pressure higher and do it again to measure my aerobic capacity. Well, that was causing very severe symptoms for me. And I thought, these guys don't know what they're talking about. And they're the top researchers in Australia. So I'm going to have to do something about this. And then I thought, if I go home now and do nothing, because this is, in my view, dangerous, I'm never going to get better. So I went back to the institute and started their training program. And there's this young guy, about 19, sitting on the side of an oval, and with 50 people there, running around 2 laps of a 400-yard track. Within 5 minutes, I was running last. And he said, "You got to run fast if you want to get fit and healthy again." And I thought, oh, he's a lost cause, because that was impossible. My heart was pounding violently, and he's telling me to run fast. But he stopped telling me to do that. So I continued to run slow while everyone else outlapped me. And when I was inside doing lighter exercises, one day a few months later, I got involved in a relay. And everyone, it meant we'll say, "Come on, come on, come on, our relay team has to win." And so I tried to keep up so that the team didn't lose. And I collapsed on the floor. It took me at least a half an hour to recover before I could go home. And I didn't do that again, because I knew the people at the institute didn't know what they're talking about. They're top researchers. So I never ever did that again. But what I did do was continue training for about a year before I injured my knee and had to stop. And in the meantime, I developed a modern method of treating that problem, doing everything at your own pace. I stay within my limits to avoid those severe symptoms. So if you want to know more about how I developed the severe symptoms of chronic fatigue and how I developed the modern method of treating it, I'll discuss that in my next video. So I hope you found this information useful, and thank you for watching.